Oh, it's live.
Good evening, everyone. I welcome all of you to the fifth and final Exun Talks. Founded in 1992, Exun is the Computer Science and Technology Hub at UPSR. We hope that these sessions have been enlightening. Our speaker for today is Aarman Roy, an alumnus of Exun and a current student at the School of Visual Arts in New York. He is also the co-founder of Akademi, and today he will be delivering a talk on design. So without any further delay, here's Arman.
Hello, everyone. I'm Arman. Thank you, Exun. Thank you for having me over here. It's great to revisit and be part of this after so many years. So, a little bit about me. I'm studying design at School of Visual Arts right now, but I also was an engineer, and I'll come to that as during the course of my talk. I also co-founded this publication called Academy, which will go into print hopefully soon. And so, yeah, my talk is titled final underscore final underscore okay, this is final. Basically, as like an inside joke among designers that, we always have multiple versions, nothing's ever done. And I think somewhere in this talk, you'll see why I titled it the way I did. So let's get into it. So I'm Arman, and I'm a graphic designer based in New York. Right now, I'm in India. So my work is a mix of experimentation with graphic design, 3D, and motion graphics. I aim to create a range of work that's diverse and beautiful, and at the same time pushes some aesthetic boundaries. That's how I would introduce my work. You can also see my work. This is my Instagram handle. So I want to play like a small motion reel, just to give you a small glimpse of the kind of work I do, and then we'll move on further. So I'm playing it right now. I get those goosebumps every time. I need time. Yeah, that was a brief intro to my motion work. So, probably the most significant part of my design career, at least, started with Exun, because if I did not have the kind of space and nourishment and support that I got here, I wouldn't have pursued it to this extent or even thought of pursuing it. So I joined Exon around when I was in 10th grade. And I 11th and 12th. In 12th, I became creative head, where I handled most of the creative events and designing underscore and all those things. Uh, I was encouraged a lot by my seniors, Achal Verma, Akshay Sani, and everybody else to pursue it further. So one of my earlier works was obviously this logo for pseudocrypt. Like, this is the first iteration that I made. So Sibesh, also my batchmate, he said, Arman, can you make a quick logo for us for this event? And he has the best ideas, honestly, even for one of the best creative events I've ever attended. This, I think, this was 2014. So he basically designed most of it, and we fleshed it out. But this poster is probably like a tipping point in my design practice, or at least, where there was like Eureka moment that, okay, I can make something good. So Mukesh sir assigned me this task to make this poster for X in 2012. And this was like a promo poster that went on to all the schools. And I don't know what came over me, and I just uh, went for a very typographic heavy, poster. And you can also see those 3D elements, which you'll see later in my work, that it all started from there. So I'm ashamed that I don't have a higher res version of this, but definitely one of my favorite works I did, and this was back in 2012. This is another gem that I found. So Sibesh and I went for this competition in I it was a NASCOM competition. We got a lot of source images and we had to make something on open source software. This was again, which year was it? 2011. Yeah, we made this in 2011 and we won first prize. So that was pretty crazy because that's when all of us were learning Photoshop together, competing amongst each other. And I think what Exxon also did was foster this community who I still am friends with a lot of those people. Like in New York, I live with my friend Panini. He also I met through competitions that I used to go for. So we met in 2012 and we've been friends since. So that's why I keep saying that Exxon has been a big part of my design journey. And I want to show like a progression of where I started to where I'm actually here right now. I was also working with Sibesh and Gyan and everybody else from my batch to make the first to expand the creative events, and that was the first in 2013 was the first year where we actually had like a massive consolidated event with web design, probably like the first iteration of a product design sort of hackathon or creative hackathon. So that was like a great opportunity, and thank you for everything, Mukesh sir, because he's the one who's really trusted me and forced me to, pushed me to go ahead and pursue what I wanted to do. I remember he told me this one thing in just before I graduated. He's like, Arman, I don't think you should go into like a traditional tech job because you're meant to be like an artist and a designer. And I'm so glad he said that to me because I see myself going that trajectory or at least making all those choices since 2014 when I graduated to right now. Like I'm 24 right now. So yeah, thank you for everything. I'm pretty sure a lot of students who've graduated from Exun and Leaves Akuvaram and who've had the pleasure to be taught by him would feel the same. So I'm from New Delhi, and I used to live in Dubai before this. Then I moved to, so I was in engineering college over here. I went through the entire IIT, DTU, the entire cycle. But what happened was I was never into it. So I just happened to be good at math and science, but I never really enjoyed it as much to, study it all 4 years of college. So I entered DTU. I realized, okay, I don't like this at all. So in that same time, because of the entire IIT JEE, madness, I had stopped designing completely. So what you saw before this, the posters, those are the last sort of like creative things that I had done. I mean, I'd done more. I just don't have them because they're on my hard drive and it's in New York. So anyway, I was in DTU. I was very sad. I didn't know what I was doing. It was like I mean, it was terrible for me basically. But at the same time, I met my partner who really helped me to, push me to start designing again. And that's when I started little by little, went through different, applied to different places, got exhibitions. It was a slow ride. I was still in college, just barely passing. Then I decided to apply to SVA because, like I mentioned, my friend Panini, I noticed that he got in, and that was like another tipping point for my life. Is where I thought, okay, if he can do it, maybe I do have a good shot. And so the next year, I spent all my time trying to make a portfolio, and I got into School of Visual Arts. So then I went to New York, and it's been a pretty wild ride. I've been there for 2 years. So effectively, this is like my second bachelor's. I am not a graduate yet. If somebody asks me what are my education qualifications right now, I'm just a high school pass out. But that's okay. I'm making work that I love, and I hope to continue doing that. Um, but right now, I am based out of Goa because okay, it's really bad in Delhi. I came back just before the pandemic hit in the world. I left New York. I came back to India. I was in Delhi with my parents. But for the past month, I've been in Goa, and it's been pretty good. Life's good here, and I'll probably go back whenever things get better in Delhi. So I want to segue into my work. So a big part of my work is just a lot of experiments and play. I believe in making with reckless abandon and then editing everything else. So and I think school really forced that into my head is that make a lot and then edit all the best work. So I think that's a very effective approach. So not everything doesn't have to be a masterpiece, and it's fine to make crap. And as you'll see as I go. So another this my third tipping point would be when I got introduced to 3D. And so I was actually doing 3D in like engineering college. I was studying SolidWorks. Again, I hated it, not my thing. But then somehow I just got into Cinema 4D. Somebody introduced that to me, and it just clicked because it was just so intuitive to use. And since then, I've it just unlocked another skill set or another way of making things for me. So I've been experimenting a lot with like 3D renders and bridging and breaking that gap between what's real and what's not. I mean, referencing a lot of real world references, but at the same time, it's pretty surreal because nothing like this can exist, but it seems that it can almost exist. So that's where I always want to toe my line while working, the kind of work that I want to create. So New York also helped me to basically break out of this frustration that I had with a lot of design that I saw. That school basically and New York basically taught me that I can just make anything I want. I don't need to stick to trends for design. I don't need to make design look a certain way. Whatever I want to do, I can. And I mean, it sounds very silly, but it's very true. When you give yourself that freedom to make as you wish, that's when new or exciting things come up. Because if you keep following, I mean, okay, like trends exist for a reason, UI UX principles exist for a reason, but that doesn't mean you can't experiment or just break them. I'm a big believer of learning all the rules and then breaking them because you're very intentional about everything. And design is all about intention. It's all about the details. It's all about the whys, and it's all about intention completely. So here are some works that I've made using Arnold and Cinema 4D, and most of them were like experiments or things that struck me like an inspiration during events or while I was out and about. Also, you can see like a lot of my work has a lot of shiny elements. That's because that's something again I noticed that I like, and I just thought why not roll with it. I mean, I don't need to make anybody else happy except for myself over here when I'm making things. So that's how I went. Yeah, and then most of these are like experiments. Again, another thought. Usually, I like my renders looking very nice and pretty and with great lighting. But sometimes, I'm like, why not just mess around with it? Why not just mind my. So this is an example of completely processing it through Photoshop, multiple layers of distortions, threshold, just destroying it in a way. And I think I came up with something that was very interesting because I would have never made this if I didn't put it through that process of destroying it in a way. This was like a pretty funny artwork. I made this when it was a very hot day in New York, and this sort of was a manifestation of that frustration of, or at least I was just tired after a very hot day in the New York summer. Yeah, and basically 3D just gives me the freedom to make very interesting materials, compositions, and which I wouldn't have otherwise been able to make traditionally or say on Photoshop or Illustrator. Typography, and then slowly with posters like this, I started introducing Photoshop objects on top of my own work. At this point, I also started my work started blurring some lines where I was mixing. I mean, you can see emojis here. So I was mixing photographs, I was mixing typography, I was mixing 3D, handmade things, as you'll see as I go on. So, like I said, just you're not bound by your tools. Tools help you to make things. Again, so just make whatever you want, mash it together, cut it together, throw it, burn it, scan it back in. I don't know, but if you give yourself that freedom, great work always happens. So again, some of my posters here. So the one on the left was for an exhibition at the Irregulars Art Fair, and the funny story is I never wanted to submit this. I was half asleep. My deadline was in 2 hours, and somehow I made this. And till date, I think it's one of my favorite posters ever because it's very abstract in the sense that nobody it's not, it breaks every single design rule because I stretch type, the type's legible but also not legible. A lot of design choices might not make sense, but for the kind of topic it was, that was on altered realities, I think it did. Also, if you look in the background, you can see these small stamps. Those were again like small lino cut stamps I'd made. I printed it using ink, scanned it back in, put in the background, cut it up, added changes. The one on the right was for a class assignment. It was again on climate change. I mean, if you look at it, it's I borrowed heavily from Japanese design influences. By the way, you should all check out, a lot of Japanese graphic designers like Iko Tanaka or Aizen Suzuki and all those people, because they're like huge inspirations for me. And that this poster basically came out of that. Again, I mean, this was again me just, I mean, I could gone for a simple globe with like fire. I don't know, like very literal imagery, but this wasn't, and I think that's where the exciting bit comes in. That graphic design doesn't have to be staid or plain. You can infuse your own personal inspiration and your own personality into it, and that's completely okay. These were a series of posters that I'd done when the entire CNRC thing was going on, and some of these posters are also up at Shaheen Bagh. But more importantly, my process for this again was just ink. I basically took tissue paper, ink, made these on paper, brought it into Photoshop, and then treated it further. So even for the educate, agitate, organize, a quote by B.R. Ambedkar, that was basically I made multiple versions of each letter, and then I just chose the one that I liked, cut it out in Photoshop, and then place it all together again. So like I said, your tools are just exist to help you make what you have in your mind. You don't have to be bound by them, and handmade is a great way of bringing some excitement to your work. This was again like this poster that I took inspiration from all the flyers that you see out in India. So you see all these ads for Xerox papers or call centers and all those things that are stuck on electrical boxes here in India. So that was a big inspiration for this choice of paper and how tightly the text is typeset. This is like a call for pitches for my project called Academy Magazine, which I will be introducing in a bit. And so this is also like another manifestation of the kind of different techniques that I'm trying to mix real world as well as digital techniques in a way. So here I'll be sharing some of my professional work that I've done so far. So the first one I did during my first internship in New York. This was for Apple Music. Okay, heads up, this is all confidential. Please don't take screenshots because this project was canned. I'm really sad about it. We had 7 rounds. So I was interning with my boss, Supong Zhu. I'll show you the Instagram handle where you can follow him. So I was interning with him. The first project I worked on with him was rebranding A-list pop for Apple Music, and we had 7 rounds of artworks. What this of branding iterations. What this project taught me was it was about working on scale. So this was like a pretty big project in terms of, because a lot of people would get to see it. Potentially it didn't happen, but that's fine. And on top of that, it had to work in a lot of different formats. So Apple gave us a lot of different what do you say, formats and identity how do you say, identity template which we had to fit. So this had to be like a malleable what do you say, a malleable identity which could work on covers, banners, advertising, in store, everything. So this was like the first direction on gradients. This is my favorite direction that we did. This was basically taking up circles, and we developed the typeface and a color system to go with all the artists. Then they also wanted versions where we didn't have any hero artist imagery. So the artist is usually the biggest focus, even on a small screen. That should be the biggest focus here. And these are retail mock-ups that we did for them. This is like the final round of typeface that they liked. So if you actually see the A-list pop players right now, it's very similar to this, but they obviously chose a different kind of branding, which I'm very sad about. Though what this because in this project, every day that I was working on this, we used to start with 80 artboards and illustrate and used to fill them by the end of the day. So it was basically producing a lot of work, a lot of directions, finding the best possible solution. And sometimes that doesn't happen, it's okay if it didn't happen, but the process taught me a lot. And ever since that, this project, why I'm highlighting it, it's significant for me, is because that taught me like a very different way of thinking. First, I used to only make images that were, singular or had a specific idea, but this sort of broke that. I had to produce 60 to 80 artworks in a way every day. And this went on for 3 weeks, so you can do the math. It was a lot of images, a lot of files, lot of presentations to make. And that's how it's done usually now. That's what I noticed, that you cannot hit the first idea in the first go. You have to make a lot, you have to experiment with different things, you have to check out different directions, and maybe something might come out. And it's okay if it's not selected or it's not successful. What it does teach you is that capacity, that the best ideas doesn't have to come in the first go, and you expand your visual vocabulary. So you now have many different visual ideas that you can pick from because you've made so much. And since you're also making a lot, that means you're also putting a lot of time into it. And this is something that is very true about design. If you put more time, you will never get bad. It is not possible at all. You'll only get better. So this is why this project was pretty significant for me, even though it didn't work out. Yeah, so I work with Zupong Zoo. That's his Instagram handle, and that's the studio's Instagram handle. If you are interested, you can check out the work. Coming back to Apple again, this project in a way helped me get hired at Apple. So I was actually going to work at Apple last summer as part of a design intern in the marketing communications team in California. But it didn't happen because of COVID. I was back home in India and they had to defer my internship. So I don't know what's the status now, but I'm pretty sad about it because it was a big personal and professional milestone for me to get hired by them. Hopefully it works out sometime in the future. Let's see. Fingers crossed. Yeah, it didn't work out. I'm pretty sad about it. So anyway, here is some work that I have that I'm showing you from SVA at School of Visual Arts. That's things I've done in school. So the first project is this branding project for an olive oil bottle. This was done under John Newman, great designer, amazing teacher. So since this was again this project, I had to make it in the middle of the pandemic because all my school went online, and I couldn't actually physically construct the bottles. So I just made it in 3D. And obviously, what 3D also allows me to do is to explore different material options. So I try to simulate foiling. If you gold foil certain parts of your design, so that's what I did over here. And I couldn't have obviously done that in school because foiling is very expensive. And I think this is a great way of making product renders and iterating before you show it to clients or commit to like a factory process. All of these were rendered on Arnold. Even though everything was rendered, there's nothing that was made in person. So it just shows how far consumer 3D technology and rendering has come. Um, then this poster again was this project. We had to redesign a couple of posters for MoMA, and this was again for John Newman's class. We got like an exhibition on modernist chairs that were being on plywood, and how plywood, the technology that has changed and the kind of artworks that are produced because of this medium. These were so I again modeled everything in 3D and took different objects and melded them together to make this. So the type lockup, title, and main graphic. I wanted to basically make it look like something that you might see uh, for a MoMA poster. Definitely one of my favorite projects that I've done in school, only because I think I reached like close to like a visual fidelity that I want to see in the future in my own work. So this is my first iteration of this was actually this. So I printed the poster on a T-shirt. Yeah, so I this is the first thing I did. The first one I chose was is fashion is modern. So I had a choice between plywood or is fashion is modern. So I chose this one first, and I actually printed this on my T-shirt. Like I screen printed it, and you can see me wearing it on the right. But my professor said, like it's a great idea, but it only stops here. You cannot really expand on it. So that's when I switched to the other. But it's again, I'm reiterating the fact that you're not limited by your medium or tools. Just go ahead and make whatever you have to, and there's nothing like the real thing. 3D is only can only help you in some way, but there's something very special about making things by hand, which no computers can simulate all the imperfections or the kind of textures that you get. This one is an editorial project. I had to redesign a couple of newsletters. So this is typeset in Sharp Grotesque by Sharp Foundry, if you're not familiar with it. And this was like my first bigger editorial project. So I took a lot of inspiration from Bloomberg Business Week. You should check out their work. Very cool editorial design, very fresh. um, so like this sort of I always liked magazines even as a kid, which had a lot of small details on the pages. So it's very dynamic. I mean, your eyes can move anywhere. You can pick small details. You can put your eyes on the small illustrations or the did you know facts. For I think that's why I liked Tinkle comics so much, because it's just packed and so dense with so many things going on one single page. I think that's also a great example of good editorial design within India, but that's specifically aimed for kids. But good design is everywhere. It doesn't have to look a certain way to be good design. This is again uh, taking the same inspiration. Again, I drew the thing with paint, sketch pen, and then scanned it back in to be put into the pages. Yeah, this is my favorite spread from what I've done in this project. So coming down to the next thing I want to talk about is Academy, the one project that I've been running with my partner. So she was also in New York with me, and she was at Columbia, and she was very frustrated you know, with academia. So we plan to start our own political publication. So I've done all the artworks mostly, and right now we've managed to grow to about 26,000 followers on Instagram, and it's not even been a year. So the pace has really picked up, and we're pretty surprised with the great response that we've got. So our main idea is to provide a place where people from marginalized communities can write, and we talk about issues which mainstream media doesn't cover. And I make all the artworks, most of them, and through that basically bridges the gap between people not wanting to engage with it to people actually being curious and reading it. So I think that's why we've been able to get the kind of feedback and following that we have in less than a year. So we've covered topics that span politics, climate, about gender, about technology, and all these different things which is not present at all in mainstream media. So even culture. So we have a very diverse set of writers who've written for us and we've worked with. We're very contributor focused, and that shows in all our work. So if you see all my covers, there's a big emphasis on texture and creating this sort of bridge between very rigid vector graphics and handmade uh, handmade artwork. So I think that's like we don't have a set visual identity, but I take inspiration from real life books, from textures from there, scan it in, and make all these things. So this was a very this has been a great project that I've been working on for the past year. I've made about 120 covers in a way, and surprisingly, this logo was not made by me. My partner made it, even though I'm the graphic designer. And I've really grown into it. This is typeset in org, again by Sharp Foundry. Yeah, and if you like what you've seen here, you should probably follow us. We're Academy Mag on Instagram, and we also have a website, academymag.com, if you want to read the pieces in full. So right now it's me who's designing, my partner and another friend of mine, Sky. So they're the two main editors. Uh, and we're slowly trying to get funded, possibly go into print very soon. A lot of print magazines in New York inspired me, and her. So that's our biggest inspiration right now to bring the kind of finesse both in writing and design to India. That's our next focus. So a couple of pro tips that I can give. I'd probably want it as a student, when I was in school, is learn all your keyboard shortcuts. I mean, if somebody asks you to do like the ABCD of keyboard shortcuts, you should probably know it. It also makes you look cooler when you work because you have both your hands in it and it's all moving all over the keyboard pretty fast and you have that speed. Because the more time you save in repetitive actions, the more time you have to, spend on thinking, on intuition, on judgment, rather than actual just boring mechanical tasks. So that's number one. And second is always name and organize your layers. I cannot explain just how important that is, because when you're working with other people, if you're working in a bad way, that just slows everyone down in the pipeline. And this for your own self, because this also goes with the next thing, is that don't delete anything. Always have backups. Like, because I regret not having backups, because I had to like pull like a very pixelated poster that I made, which I showed earlier right now. And yeah, just back up everything. Don't delete anything. You never know what you might want to pick up from a certain layer and certain file for a current project you're working on. I do this all the time. If you actually go through like my actual Academy Mac files, you'll see I've pulled things from different assets I've created for other things. I've pulled gradients from maybe the Apple thing. I mean, it's just it's a mix. So you should always have it on hand and always try to take things and bring it in. And if you're organized, it greatly helps that process. Another, this is more geared to, it's minor life advice, only because as when I was in school, when I was 18 or 17, I obviously didn't think there was a world beyond engineering, that design could be something that I could do professionally and earn money out of. So, or just more than money, I'd be both, uh, what do you say, I'd be internally satisfied, because during my time it was always, it's not a career, it's not worth doing it. And it's not you can't do it if you don't get into NID, all those things. So I obviously didn't have the spine to fight all those social pressures back then. So if any of you are in that position where you're not sure, then it's okay. It's completely fine, because I'm 24. I'm still in my third year of my bachelor's, and this is nothing to be ashamed of, because everybody has their own time. Everybody figures out things in their own pace. You're living your life. Nobody else lives that for you. So do what you think is right. I mean, there are so many other pressures that follow, but if I didn't make the choices that I did, like leaving engineering or taking the leap of faith to go to SVA, I wouldn't have worked on all these projects. I mean, there are two more projects that I'm working with Netflix that I want to share, but I cannot at all because of NDAs. But if your work's good, if you like what you do, if you're hungry to excel, everything else follows. What basically, if you're not motivated to do well in what you're doing, then you should probably think about the choices that you're making right now. because I wasn't bothered at all during engineering to uh, score well or learn. I just coasted through. I didn't fail any classes, but my GPA was like 5.6. So yeah, I mean, if you're not motivated to do better, we should probably revisit uh, why you're doing what you're doing right now. And yeah, and that basic and what logically follows is that it's okay to make changes to your plans as you go. This publication also was like a big change because in between school I really didn't have any plans to make this, but certain changes in our political climate, things that are happening around the world, sort of forced us to approach this project, make it more inclusive. And because the world was going in the opposite direction, it was getting more divided, more hateful. And that's one example of how I made changes to my plan, and apart from obviously completely changing my career trajectory. So yeah, and there is no set time, there is no set yardstick you need to meet at a certain age or a certain position in your life. You are living it. It's okay to make changes if you feel fit, and it's okay to leave things if it gets abusive, and it's okay to not leave things if you don't feel like giving up. Again, it's your personal choice. This is something that I've also faced, and this comes into well a lot of things. And also, even in your if you're a designer or if you're an artist, that you make things, or even in your life for the choices that you do, everyone will improve, and that's again, it's okay. What matters is if you're content with it, because you've made those choices for yourself. And that's probably the biggest thing that I'm trying to like say to you all, is because I would have wanted to hear this when I was 18. That it is okay if I didn't want to do engineering. It's okay if I did not want to spend all my weekends at Fiji. That I had the chance or opportunity. This also comes from a lot of privilege. Not everybody has the monetary or social capital to leave the set career paths. Because I've met a lot of people in my school in DTU, sorry, in my college in DTU, who where engineering was a sure shot ticket out of poverty. And human life is complex, so and they had to make that choice both for themselves and for their families. So what I was able to do, it was out of sheer privilege. But if you have that privilege, make the best use of it. That's where it goes. Try and help people who are not as privileged as you, but also at the same time make like I was walking around in Oslo once, and I saw this really good quote, is that if you have the space, just build a longer table, like not higher walls. So that's something that I'm trying to abide by in my life. And and I look at everything from that point of view, is that am I building a bigger table, or not gatekeeping people out of things. This is again another revelation that I had during my years, is that comfort is not always equal to happiness. Sometimes discomfort leads to happiness, and sometimes comfort is this. Why I'm saying this, because I was basically I was like a gaming addict in 2014, sorry, 15. So yeah, in my first year at DTU, I used to spend hours playing Warframe, to the point where I used to sleep less to play more. So I had like a separate group of friends who I used to play in the morning, like my American friends, and then throughout the day and night I used to play with my Filipino friends. So and that felt comfortable, but I wasn't happy. I was just trying to escape a certain kind of sadness that I had with respect to my position. So having this in the back of your head when you're evaluating a certain position in your life is, is this comfort happiness, or is this a coping mechanism for something else? So that is uh, one of the biggest takeaways that I've had so far, and that I try to keep in mind as I go in my life. So yeah, and this is why I titled my talk final_final_. Okay, this is final.psd, because maybe nothing ever is final. Everything is a work in progress. Everything is going ahead. It's like a river, and there is no point where things just become stagnant. You're always in control of your own life, and you can make changes. Everything is like it's like a constantly, your life is like a project which you're constantly working on, and that's how it's for me, because right now I'm working on all these things. I don't know what will happen in the future. I don't know when I'll pivot in a way. So having that option open is exciting and scary. So that's where the discomfort also comes in, but I know that will ultimately make me happy, because that is something I'm choosing to do for myself. So yeah, that's basically why I titled my talk like that. This is the end of my talk for now, but I'm happy to take as many questions as any one of you might have. Um, if you want to reach out to me on Twitter, or sorry, on Instagram, or if you want to reach out to me on email, please free to do so. I would love to, hear what you have. If somebody wants critique, I'm also ready to do that. So yeah, that's the end of my talk. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, oh, I have a question. Your designs are bold and they look really good. How does your design process look from ideation to the final outcome? I usually have a certain idea in my head when I start, but nothing really. N- when I start, I usually have something in my head, but then it doesn't work out immediately. So I always make changes. If a certain type lockup I think looks good, but then I scroll through all the fonts, okay, and then maybe I might make another artboard, make it smaller, move it here and there, add more elements, maybe bring images in. So every design probably goes through 7 to 8 iterations. It's very different from when I actually started file. So that's and bold is something I feel is like a stylistic choice, like how writers have a stylistic voice or way of writing. Bold colors and having a very set, tight lockup with text, a focus on images or or a focal point. That's why I think it looks bold, is because that's a stylistic choice I make all the time. I hope that answers your question. Um, I think the question about contemporary theme always changes. For my colors, one big area where pick colors from is again real life. I have about 20,000 photos on my iPhone, and I always pick colors from them. There could be pictures of clothes that I see. It could be pictures of plants, the sand, and obviously, an understanding of color theory helps. I'd suggest Joseph Albert's Interaction of Color to get an idea of how your brain perceives colors. At the end of the day, images is your brain sees them, not your eyes. So, seeing how colors interact, and like for example, if you have the same color, say if it's like a yellow block, and if one is on a lighter purple background, one's on a darker background, so the level of brightness of the yellow will change, because it all depends on the background, it all depends on context. So yeah, and that understanding that and then taking references from the real world is what informs my color choices. Fashion is a great way, fashion and paintings, classical painting and fashion, great way to find very exciting colors, because if you're only on Dribbble and Pinterest, a lot of the same colors and gradient patterns are repeated. So I'd avoid that. And textures, all of them are just photographs. Like, I mean, I can't find it. Like in one of my artworks, I basically took a picture of this, and that was my texture pattern. So this one time I was on the beach and there was a lot of mud on my leg. I took a picture of that. That was my texture pattern. Sometimes even this is a texture pattern. If I click a picture with it with good light. So it's everything that's around you. And Photoshop is the best friend for that. I hope that answers your question. The next one, okay. Aryaman asks, how can I add such aesthetic colors in my project, as when I design, I can't get such colors. It's usually messed up. So how do you get those colors right? Uh, I'd suggest making sure all your color profiles are all right. I'm usually working in sRGB, but make sure your monitor output and your Photoshop output is the same. That I had this problem initially, but ever since I fixed that setting, there isn't that mismatch of colors. Um, I'm always working in RGB unless if it's going for print. And again, I am coming back to the point about color theory. Is sometimes if you have colors that are too close together, there isn't enough contrast in the scene. Colors can look muddy, or they might look as if they're mixing into each other, and it dulls the entire composition. So contrast, whether it's value, white to different values, white, gray, black, how much of it of is there in the scene. Similarly with colors, if you're using too many shades of pastel, again it might end up looking very gray because they tend to mix together and produce like a grayish white. Again, how do I know this, or how do you explain that? It's because of color theory. So revisit those concepts, and that'll help you make better choices and make meaningful correlations with color. Uh, I hope that answers your question. The next one. Distinction between science and art, can the line between the two be blurred? I mean, in a way, yes. Obviously, they don't. Like I said, because I've had both these experiences, I just realized there's nothing that's you can't really compartmentalize everything. For anything to be successful, there's usually like some overlap of different disciplines, and for example, even like a lot of people do like coding art, which I think is great, which is some sort of bridge between science and art. I mean, digital art is, well, a manifestation of science, because somebody built microprocessors, displays, coded in computer graphics. I mean, sorry, made algorithms for making lines, gradients, all those things. Yeah, and I mean, I think it's probably the third time I'm saying it, but again, color theory is, well, how our eyes experience that color, like your rods and cones in your eyes, and spectrum, and how you utilize that to make art. So maybe Newton wrote about optics and everything, but it's artists who made use of that scientific knowledge to have to push the limits of our human visual understanding. So I think it's already being pretty blurred. In some cases, it cannot. I mean, I remember at SVI I saw this one exhibition on. We had this workshop where you have bioluminescent what do you say, bacteria, and you can actually make paintings out of them. So that is another, and maybe say if you're branding for like a bacteria consortium, I don't know, just bear with me, and you use that as your main if you make typography using those bioluminescent bacteria. So that's basically mixing art, design, biology, chemistry, everything together. So yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's already being blurred. Uh, I hope that answers the question. If anybody has any other questions, let me know. Oh, and thank you for all the nice comments about my work. It's really nice to see that you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Mukesh sir. Thank you for attending the talk. Uh, I hope you're fine. It's been a while, and thank you for always pushing me to come here. Do you think UI and product design can be put in the same sort of work? Yeah, why not? You can already see a lot of it changing. Look at Airbnb, for example. A big portion of their branding is, well, illustrations, and they have a very diverse set of illustrators who bring in all this work. Right now, I think UI and product design it's very there's a science to it. There's like a methodology, because most of it depend on a certain use, a certain functionality, and a certain goal that has to be met. And there are very standardized rules now, the F pattern and how you read your eyes, CTAs, how they must look. But within that, it doesn't mean they can't look different. If you follow the same principles of, I mean, UI in a way is applied graphic design. They use the same principles that even Swiss designers in the 1960s did. It's just a different application. So you really don't have to feel that they have to be very separate between this sort of work and UI. I mean, look at DIA Studio. They're from their studio in New York. They basically invented the current kinetic typography and motion graphics, which everybody uses: Squarespace, Nike, Adidas, and they also do UI work, and you can see that bleed into their work. And so, yeah, it doesn't have to be divorced, I feel. I mean, right now it's probably changed where everybody's sick of having the same sort of dribblified Silicon Valley graphics. So I think everybody, I mean, even all these shiny Chrome graphics, which I did, was probably like a manifestation of that frustration. And you can see it changing. People are making more, what do you say, brave choices when it comes to product and UI design. Yeah, it took me 3 years. So I did have a hard time convincing my parents to pursue a design career, but they've been very supportive since. Um, I wouldn't have been able to go to SVA if they didn't actually want to take that shot on me and provide that emotional and monetary support. So it did take me a lot of time. Possibly getting hired by Apple really cemented that, okay, maybe he's good. So, and that was also like a big personal milestone for me because I've always adored a lot of design that Apple has done, even with their communications. So, being hired into that team was a pretty great milestone for myself. Yeah, but I mean, with parents, it's just all about having that persistence with them, trying to even they want the best for you. So, but they may not be able to see the way that you're seeing things. So, it's important to meet them halfway. It takes time, but it's possible.
Thank you for a really interesting session, Arman. I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure everyone else who attended it
Thank you
found
so
it
much for having
interesting.
me. I mean,
Uh,
yeah.
that's it for that's it for today. Thank you everyone for attending Exun
Thank you.
Talks.
Take care. Bye.